How does the most brutal military machine in human history vanish overnight? You might think empires fall slowly, rotting from the inside out over centuries. But what happened to the Assyrians wasn't a decline, it was an execution. One day, they were the undisputed masters of the world, flaying kings alive and piling skulls outside city gates. The next day, they were smoke. And the craziest part isn't that they fell, it's who took them down. It wasn't a rival superpower, it wasn't a massive invasion from a technologically superior force. It was a group of mountain tribes that the Assyrians treated like dirt. The Medes. So, to understand how this impossible upset happened, you have to understand just how terrifying the Assyrians actually were. Imagine a nation entirely dedicated to war. They were the first true superpower. They had iron weapons when everyone else had bronze. They had professional standing armies, siege engines, and a propaganda machine that would make modern dictators blush. Their kings, men like Ashurbanipal, didn't just want to conquer you, they wanted to traumatize you. They carved reliefs in their palaces showing exactly what they did to rebels, skinning them, blinding them, impaling them on stakes. The message was simple: resistance is suicide. For centuries, this worked. The Medes? They were just a collection of loose tribes in the Zagros mountains of modern-day Iran. They were disorganized. They fought each other as much as they fought anyone else. To the Assyrians, the Medes were just a source of tribute, horses mostly, and slaves. They were pests. But here's the thing about ruling through pure terror. You don't make friends, you make victims who are just waiting for you to blink. Enter Cyaxares. If you remember one name from this story, make it his. He wasn't just a tribal chief, he was a visionary. He realized that as long as the Medes fought like tribes, they would die like tribes. So he did something radical. He completely reorganized the Median army. He stopped the intertribal feuds and standardized their equipment. He separated the spearmen from the archers and the cavalry. He basically looked at the Assyrian military manual and said, "We're going to do that, but we're going to do it with the anger of a people who have been abused for generations." But Cyaxares was smart enough to know he couldn't do it alone. He needed an ally. And down in the south, the Babylonians were just as sick of Assyrian cruelty as the Medes were. So, in a move that terrified the ancient world, the mountain warriors shook hands with the city builders. The Medes and the Babylonians formed a coalition purely out of hatred for their common enemy. Now fast forward to 612 BC. This is the moment the world held its breath. The combined armies march on Nineveh. You have to understand, Nineveh wasn't just a city. It was the greatest metropolis on earth. Its walls were massive, towers rising hundreds of feet into the air, moats wide enough to stop any charge. It was supposed to be impregnable. But remember that contrast. The Assyrians were rigid, arrogant, relying on fear. The Medes were hungry, adaptable, and driven by pure vengeance. Sieges usually took years. Nineveh fell in 3 months. Historians still argue about exactly how it happened. Some say the Tigris River flooded and undermined the walls, a literal act of God helping the Medes. Others say there was a breach caused by a Trojan horse-style betrayal. But however they got in, once the Medes breached those walls, it was a slaughter. They didn't just loot the city, they tried to wipe it off the face of the earth. The violence was so extreme that the Assyrian king, Sin-Shar-Ishkun, realized there was no escape. Legend says he built a massive pyre in his palace, gathered his wives and his treasures, and burned himself alive rather than face the Medes. And here is the most shocking part of the contrast. The Assyrians spent centuries building monuments to ensure they would be remembered forever. The Medes destroyed them so thoroughly that just 200 years later, when the Greek writer Xenophon marched past the ruins of Nineveh, he didn't even know what it was. He saw these massive, crumbling walls and asked the locals who built them, They didn't say, the Assyrians. They said, the Medes lived here once. The destruction was so complete that the world forgot the Assyrians even existed until archaeologists started digging them up in the 1800s. The Medes went from being decentralized vassals to the kings of the Middle East in a single generation. They proved that a superpower built on fear is actually incredibly fragile. Once the fear breaks, there's no loyalty left to hold the structure up. It makes you wonder, if we look at the superpowers of today, which ones are built on loyalty, and which ones are just one bad day away from being the next Nineveh? What do you think is the modern equivalent of the Assyrian Empire? Let me know in the comments below.